Do you guys like Bunny? Of course you do. That's a stupid question. I don't even know why I asked that. But do you guys like Bunny to the point where you would just want to use her everywhere? Because that is a valid thought process. Because she's great for mobbing and even not so bad at bossing. Also, have you ever wanted to have near infinite super speed? That's right. Look at it. It's not even going down that fast. How is that possible? It's actually pretty simple. Also, having her to be a boss killer, mixing in her abilities and her gunplay. Ooh, what's good, folks? It's Nightmare Frame here with a new First Descendant video coming at you with updated bunny builds. One for massive ad clear. When I say massive, I mean massive. So your bunny can swing both ways. Wait, hold up. Now here's a quick disclaimer before I start the video. There are things called skill modules. Those red mods that change how your skills, which I'll be calling abilities, work. Instead of calling those skill modules, I'll be calling them augments, as they actually do augment your ability. And it's easier than saying skill module. Augments sound cooler. Now the first thing that you're going to see when you look at Bunny, not her butt, stop looking there, is that she has two bars right underneath her abilities. The first bar is her mana pool, and the second bar is the electricity meter that is unique to her. This is a resource bar that powers her other abilities. Notice how the second ability is ready to cast while the other three are grayed out or blued out at this point. They will only become available when I build up the electricity meter, and building up this electricity meter is very simple. All you have to do is build up kinetic energy, and that's by moving. Notice how when I move, it's charging up, and when I sprint, it's charging a bit faster. But when I activate my second ability, it charges even faster. And now that my electricity meter is filled up, I'm able to use my first, third, and fourth skill. And those abilities increase in damage depending on how much electricity meter you've filled up. Now, the reason I'm always moving is because if I stop moving, you'll notice that the electricity meter will start to deplete. So the thing with Bunny is that you have to be a schizo. Never stop moving. Because if you stop moving, well, you're going to lose out in damage. And when you use these abilities, they will consume the electricity meter. So the first skill will consume a little bit of that meter. And of course, the more you move, it will regenerate the electricity meter. And the third skill is what everybody builds Bunny for. It's this massive ring that surrounds Bunny and deals electric damage over time with a 1-second interval. Now, this ability will increase in its damage if you have your electricity meter full, and will increase the pulses the faster you move. So that's why you always want Bunny to move fast. And the fourth ability will drain your electricity meter over time, but of course increases in damage the more you shoot. Now both of the builds will be centered around her third skill. As you've seen, it creates that ring and pulsates, dealing damage over time. Now Bunny is a very overtuned character with really high skill power modifiers. The ring originally has 7 meters, but I do have a reactor that increases my range, and we'll get to that. And with the first build, you will get 27 meters. Yes, I want you to think about that for a second. Massive, massive AoE. The other thing I want you to take note of is that Bunny's abilities do crit. She originally has 10% crit rate, which is low, very, very low. Now, in my previous videos, I did build around her critting with her third ability, and it wasn't that great. We never got that high with critical hit rate. Now, the issue with modding for crit on Bunny is that you're missing out on important mods that will help improve her a lot more than adding crits on the build. Granted, critting does allow you to do more damage with the abilities, but with such a low crit rate will require a lot more investment just to have barely any consistency. She does pulsate a lot faster when you move faster, which does increase the probability of you critting more often. Now, at the same time, you don't have the resources to maintain your speed for a longer duration, so you'd have to sacrifice certain things to build into crit, and I didn't like that. So that's why I decided to change my Bunny builds and forgo modding any crit on the builds. Yet I'm still able to do crazy amounts of damage, have crazy amounts of range, and not consume as much mana. Now, here's an important thing to note about Bunny. Modding for duration is not important on her. Her 1, 2, and 4 do not scale with duration. The only one that scales with duration is her third, but you can just mod for cooldown reduction, and you will have your skill ready before the ability even runs out. So that's another good thing about Bunny. You can completely skip modding for duration and just focus on the important things. Now, if you've seen the thumbnail, you of course know we're gonna be talking about high voltage, but before that, there are a lot of people people who recommend running bionic fuel. I don't recommend that at all. This will drain your health instead of your mana pool. And the funny thing is that people will combine this with walk a tightrope, where you will get increased skill power modifier and firearm attack when you're 50% or lower. Now the thing is, you need to also maintain your health, because if you just get tapped once, you die. I did test it out with both HP Collector and Walk a Tightrope. It's an interesting combo if you want to do this. However, that will require you to completely go a different route for Bunny. Electric Transition is good if you want to make Bunny a shield tank. Not so bad. Electric Condense is actually a pretty decent skill. This charges up your 4th skill and releases a massive AoE explosion. It still keeps the 4th ability as Fusion, so you might want to have some Fusion modifiers in there as well. The bouncy one is okay, but not worth using as much. Superconductor is pretty good if you want to make your team survive a bit more. And of course, the best in slot 1 is High Voltage. And unfortunately, High Voltage is only an Ultimate Bunny augment. So you're going to have to get Ultimate Bunny. And of course, you should be getting Ultimate Bunny. Now, the thing that this skill module does is that it augments her 1st and 3rd ability. When we save here, you'll notice that my 1st and 3rd ability are now greened out. Let's read what this augment does. It reduces the numbers of enemies that Thrill Bomb and Lightning Emission can strike. So that's her 1st and 3rd. This reduction in enemies is down to 3 enemies. As you can see right there, 3 monsters. And unfortunately, this does not scale with range and doesn't scale with anything. You're limited to 3 monsters. Now, on top of that, it also increases your skill power. So you do more damage with those 2 abilities. But of course, why would you use the 1st? It's stupid. We just stick to the 3. And then the last bit is that it also increases your range. Now, if you kill one of those 3 enemies, your thing will immediately switch to a new target. It does reduce the enemies that you hit, but at the same time, it increases your range and damage. Also, here's another thing. Notice how when I cast my 3rd skill, there's no ring around me anymore. It immediately targets the enemy in front of me. And it does increase in those pulses the faster I move, just like the regular 3rd ability. Notice another thing when I'm actually electrocuting them. What is that lightning from above? So this is another component, funny, to the build that makes it even more deadlier, which is the Executioner set. You get it from Hard Mode Executioner. So let's read what it does. It increases your electric skill power modifier by 8.6. And then it gets to the good part, the 4-piece set. It also increases your fusion skill power modifier. We don't care about that because we're not using fusion abilities, as her 3rd ability is singular. We don't get any bonuses from that 12%. However, take a look at the second part. On electric skill attack, when an enemy is inflicted with electrocution, it activates the Executioner's Thunderbolt at the target's location, dealing additional electrical damage equivalent to 100% of your skill power modifier. It does have a 2-second interval and a 50% chance of triggering. Now, this increases the number of enemies we hit, even though we're reduced to 3 enemies thanks to High Voltage. So let's take a look what you actually want on these components. The number 1 thing is that sensor. On the sensor, you want to have max MP and MP recovery in combat. Those 2, pretty damn good to have. And of course here, max shield, very important to have. On the memory is defense. And finally, on auxiliary, max HP. The other things that will benefit you the most is any other recovery modifiers. So something like this, where you have defense and MP recovery modifier. So if you have a look, with my 3rd skill hitting enemies, I'm increasing the amount of damage I'm dealing to all these enemies. They're all electrocuted. Not only that, the way we play Bunny is also going to be different. We're not only going to be running around, but we're going to chain in some jumps in between to further boost our damage and AoE. Now, why exactly are we jumping and bouncing when we use our skills? We're going to take a look at the second part of her passive. When you land from a double jump, you will create this little shockwave that deals electric damage, electrocutes enemies. Unfortunately, it scales with fusion multipliers. And yes, both the damage and range are affected by mods. So without further ado, let's take a look at the builds and how we put this bunny, or these bunny builds, together. Taking a look at our reactor. Now, our reactor has that Thundercage mounting. That mounting means this weapon needs to be active on me at all times to get that 160% boost to our skill power. So if we swap weapons and take a look, we lose that 160 and we just get 100%. So you always want to have this active. And because this is a mobbing build, we're not really using our weapons as much until we, of course, encounter an elite unit, which is the yellow health bar units. Otherwise, your third ability will be nuking everything in sight. Now, for the substats, the main thing you want to have is skill cost. I have skill range there. This increases my range by 1 meter, which is nice to have, but skill cost is very, very important. I was unfortunate enough because it just didn't want to drop. So you want to have skill cost and any other boost ratio. So singular boost ratio, electric skill power boost ratio, and sometimes even critical damage increase. Because let's say you do crit, it's a nice boost to your damage if you do end up critting, and you will crit regardless. But for overall damage and consistency, you want to have that skill cost and singular or electric boost ratio. However, if you're going against a boss, you definitely want to have that skill cost and that bonus damage to Colossi. That further boosts your damage. So as you can see, something like that, additional skill attack when attacking Colossus. So keep an eye out for singular electric. Unfortunately, it's special rounds, and I don't want to use special rounds and only stick to general rounds. Now, of course, I'm using a Thundercage mounting because it's a solid weapon. You get it earlier on in the game. If we have a look at the substats over there, I rolled for crit rate, crit damage, rounds per magazine, and weak point damage. This weapon does have weak point damage multiplier, so it's nice to have that bonus weak point. So this is going to be perfect for your general gameplay, for bossing, and for ad clearing. Taking a look at the build, I do have my 2 base damage mods here with rifling reinforcements and action reaction. It does increase my recoil, but you don't have to worry about that. Increase my magazine by 49%, and lastly over here, more magazine capacity along with critical damage. So both of these are pretty nice. So both of these synergize together to boost my magazine. However, with the substat increase, I do bring it up to 49. Over here, I do have my crit rate, which brings it up to 27%, plus that substat here, which takes it up to 30% critical hit rate. And since we crit, we want to multiply our damage when we crit, so I have both of the crit damage multipliers, with concentration priority giving me 120 and better concentration, plus the substat increase for that critical damage. Now, of course, our modded value is 6 times critical damage, so we deal 6 times the damage when we do crit. Of course, we want to boost our fire rate, so we fire faster and deal more damage. And over here, I have heavy aiming. This increases my weak point damage by 40%. You could use weak point sight here, which is a 35% increase. So you do have a penalty with accuracy. Accuracy just means your bullets spread. So it depends on your type of playstyle. And lastly here, I do have the electric elemental damage increase. This gives you electrical damage equal to 30% of your firearm attack. Now, elemental damage is very, very huge on these weapons. Now, if you don't care too much about elemental damage, then you have, now if you don't care too much about elemental damage, which you should, by the way, you have the option of putting sharp precision shot or even firing fiesta. Firing fiesta does have that 15-second cooldown. This weapon does fire pretty fast. So when you blow your load, you're going to notice that you're going to have that 3 seconds, but then you have to wait another 15 seconds. So let's have a look at this. We fire. When we get that reload, you can see we don't consume ammo for the next 3 seconds. However, we're going to go on that 15-second cooldown. Now, having more damage with the electrical enhancement is actually way better DPS than having firing fiesta. Sharp precision shot can be nice, but I found it to do less damage than having an electrical enhancement. Now, for those who are wondering, oh, but what about enemies who are resistant to electricity? It doesn't matter. It's just still more damage. The electrocution status effect will trigger once on an enemy, not stackable, and it will tick down for 3 seconds, if I'm not mistaken, with a 0.5 second damage interval, even if enemies are resistant to electric. You can still see we're dealing quite a decent amount of damage. Great for mobbing and bossing. All right, so let's take a look at that first bunny build, which is the 3 nuke, aka the mobbing build. Mid-air maneuver is actually going to be really nice because of her third ability is cylindrical. You're going to be hitting a lot of enemies around you, above you, and below you. So for example, boom, and you do that double jump with that landing, hitting everything in sight. Here's another thing. If you accidentally land from a hard landing like that, you can cancel that hard landing with firing your weapon once just before you land. So mid-air maneuvering for the mobbing build is actually going to be way better than any other grapple. Of course, we have high voltage here. You already know what this does. Now, our range is at 27 meters. This is thanks to skill expansion and maximize range. And of course, the reactor. Maximize range does increase my range by 94%, almost the same as this, and reduces my skill power modifier. Now, for those wondering, oh, but aren't we losing out on damage? The thing is, Bunny's abilities are so overtuned that you're not going to notice the damage loss at all. all. And if you think minus 20% is a lot, well, here we go again. Another minus 25%. But this reduces my skill costs by 35%. We're going to be pairing this mod with Strong Mentality. Having both of these reduces my skill costs even further. I could sprint forever. Well, nearly forever. But take a look at that mana bar. It's barely moving. And of course, when we kill enemies, pick up mana, it replenishes that mana. And speaking of mana, I also do have MP Collector. So when defeating an enemy, you instantly recover 12% of your MP with a 17% chance. Now, for those wondering, oh, it's just 17% chance, but we have massive AoE. So this 17% is going to feel like 50%. So we increase our range, reduce our skill cost, and that's how we're able to nuke further and reduce the amount that we consume when we use our abilities. Now for my damage multipliers, I do have Electric Specialist. This increases my electric skill power by 81% and Focus on Singular. Now since my ability is singular aligned, it's best to go with Focus on Singular. Not only does it give me a singular skill power modifier, but it also reduces the cooldown. And to have really good uptime on our third ability is Nimble Fingers. That 25% skill cooldown reduction brings our ability down to 15 seconds. So our ability will still be up while having it ready to be cast again. So that's the good thing about having skill cooldown on Bunny, where duration is useless on her. We do have our survivability with increased HP and my defenses with Iron Defense, which increases my defense by 89%, but also grants me a skill power modifier. And yeah, this is the bombing build. We're able to take this into infiltrations. We're able to take this pretty much anywhere. And funny enough, just for the funnies, I use this in bossing. It still works fine. It still works fine. But now we're going to switch it to the bossing loadouts. Now for the bossing build, you can still use the Supernova, aka the Executioner set for that, because those lightning storms are still going to help you out a lot when it comes to adding on damage. However, there is an alternative, and this alternative is good on any character because it adds on more skill power to your abilities and it gives you some utility for your general rounds weapons. Here, I will be using a different component set. This is the Slayer component set, which you get from killing hard mode Pyromaniac. Yeah, the two brothers, the electric and fire guy. But let's have a look at the set bonus. Same thing, MP recovering, combat max MP. Now the set bonus does increase my general rounds capacity. This is your ammo pool, so how much you can hold, and this also increases your rounds per magazine. The downside is that your abilities cost more to cast. Take a look at the other part. We get a 26% increase to our skill power. We're pretty much dealing even more damage with our abilities. So let's have a look at that bossing build real quick. Looking at the mods, you may have noticed it's kind of similar, but slightly different. I still do have Focus on Singular, Nimble Fingers for the cooldown reduction, and of course the singular modifier, Electric Specialist. We have Expansion for the range, Increased Defense, and Iron Defense. So we increase our defenses over here, so we're a bit more tankier. Not only that, I only have Strong Mentality for the skill cost. Frugal Mindset here for a bit more skill cost, but it gives me range. Our mod that increases our damage even more is Dangerous Ambush. Take a look at the bottom part. That's the important one. On skill attack against an immobilized enemy. So when you stun an enemy, when they go down, you know, like the Devourer or the Dead Bride or the Executioner or Pyro, when they go down, you deal more damage to them. You pair that up with high voltage, that's even more damage. These are the new improved Bunny loadouts, one for massive ad clear and mobbing, and decent amounts of damage against bosses using your abilities. For those Giga Bunny enjoyers who only want to use Bunny everywhere, I fully understand why. I mean, I can see why. But for those who really want to enjoy Bunny everywhere, play her everywhere, do everything with her, but then again, you can always interchange some of the skill modules or some of the mods themselves to suit your playstyle. You don't always have to follow a build 100% to the T, but if you like the way this is done, then go for it. So anyway, folks, that has been it for me. I do hope you've enjoyed this video and learned something from it. And if you did, please feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe. For more First Descendant content, streams, and so much more, do refer to the description. Thanks for watching. And as always, a peace. Bye-bye now.